He was considered a mathematical prodigy. He had an IQ of over 160, which is actually higher than Albert Einstein. But instead of aspiring to change the world like Einstein, he aspired to be the perfect killer. He used his genius-level IQ to make untraceable bombs and kill random targets. He also used false clues in his bombs to derail any investigation. This is the true crime story of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Theodore Kaczynski was born on May 22nd, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. When he was still an infant, he broke out in severe hives. His parents, Wanda and Theodore Kaczynski, rushed him to the hospital. When Ted was in the hospital, the doctors isolated him. They didn't allow anyone to see him outside of his parents, and they were only allowed to see him twice a week for only 2 hours. Wanda said this is what she believes changed her son. Wanda and Ted were not given the ample amount of time to bond. Wanda said when Ted was actually able to come home, he was never the same kid again. He wouldn't smile. He wouldn't look them directly in the eyes. She believes that the all-important mother-child bond was never established. There's a theory that children that don't bond with their mothers develop psychopathy as a defense mechanism. They feel no pain or trauma and have little to no empathy. A few years later, Ted's brother David was born. Ted and David didn't have a very close relationship, but David would actually help Ted financially when they got older. At the age of 10, Ted actually transferred to a different school because he tested with an IQ of 167, which is genius level. Ted actually skipped 6th grade and soon began to get teased by the older students because he was younger and in the same grade as them. Ted would basically shut down and become catatonic when he was pressured into social situations that he didn't want to be in. Throughout school, Ted was always ahead of his classmates academically. He was placed and excelled in advanced mathematics classes. He graduated high school at the age of 15 and was accepted into Harvard. Ted earned his bachelor's degree from Harvard in mathematics in 1962 at the age of 19. In his second year at Harvard, Ted actually participated in a brutal psychological experiment. It was said that this experiment was actually funded by the CIA as a mind control experiment. It consisted of each student writing an essay about their beliefs and aspirations. Those essays were then passed out to other students in the experiment. The other students were told to take that essay and then belittle the essay writer and basically torment them verbally. They would then record the responses from the person being verbally attacked. Ted was belittled and verbally abused every week. He actually spent 200 hours in this experiment. This experiment was said to be the beginning of his disdain for mind control and basically lead to all of his criminal history. In 1962, Ted went on to earn his master's and doctoral degrees in mathematics from the University of Michigan. Many of the professors at the university said that Ted Kaczynski was one of the smartest kids they had ever taught. In 1966, Ted experienced severe sexual fantasies of becoming a female. He actually made an appointment to go have a gender transition. While he was in the waiting room waiting to speak to his psychiatrist, he actually stormed off, decided he didn't want to go through with it, and felt super angry. He later said that he thought about killing the psychiatrist. He also stated that this was a major turning point in his life. He felt very disgusted with himself and embarrassed that he actually almost went through a transition. In 1967, Ted gave his doctoral dissertation on boundary functions. He actually won a reward for best dissertation in mathematics that year. His advisor called it the best he had ever taught, and some of the other dissertation advisors said that only 10 to 12 people in the whole United States would even understand what Ted was talking about in his dissertation. Ted did a 2-year stint at the University of Berkeley as an assistant professor teaching mathematics. He abruptly ended his teaching career on June 30th of 1969. Some of the professors that were teaching alongside him at Berkeley basically said that he was kind of an outcast. They tried to get him into their friend groups, but he never really took and basically wanted to be an outcast. In 1971, Ted moved to a remote location and built a cabin in Lincoln, Montana. Ted moved to that cabin because he wanted to live a secluded and simple life. The cabin didn't have electricity or running water. It basically consisted of a bed, a gas stove, a few chairs, and had a ton of books inside of it. During this time, Ted would work a few odd jobs throughout the year, but he basically was supported financially by his brother and his mom. In 1975, the area that Ted was in actually started to get built up and producing subdivisions and a lot of industrial warehousing type things. Ted was actually very upset about this and wanted to stay secluded in his cabin, so he would actually perform acts of sabotage in those subdivisions. He would actually go and try to stop the construction, and he went as far as to burn some of the construction sites down. Ted was also consumed by reading tons of books. He read books on sociology and political philosophy. One book in particular was called Technological Society by Jacques Ellul. The book basically says that modern society is being overrun by technology, engineering, all of these electronics, and basically calls for the destruction of modern society. Ted would later say that this book was basically his Bible. If Ted was ever feeling on edge, he would actually take a 2-day hike. At the end of this hike, he would be kind of on like a mountaintop overlooking some ravines and a waterfall. This was his place to go to put his mind at rest and take his mind away from all of the subdivisions and construction going on around his secluded cabin. One day, Ted was feeling especially vulnerable, so he actually decided to take this 2-day hike. When he got to his destination on top of this mountainside, he looked down into the ravine and noticed that there was a road that was built. And this road basically ruined his view. It was at that time that he basically decided that he was going to get his revenge on the system. May 25th, 1978, a passerby at the University of Chicago, Illinois, picked up a package from a parking lot and returned it to the sender. A Northwestern University professor, Buckley Chris Jr., received the package but didn't recognize it, so called security over. Security opened the package and it exploded, injuring the security guard. May 9th, 1979, a graduate student, John Harris at Northwestern University, received injuries after opening a package that looked like a present and it exploded. November 15th, 1979, American Airlines Flight 444 fills with smoke as a bomb detonates in the luggage bay. The plane makes an emergency landing and lands safely. After police and investigators look at the bomb, they determine that the bomb didn't actually work properly, and if it had, the plane would have been blown to pieces. This incident is what got the FBI involved in the chase for the Unabomber. The FBI's task force grew to over 150 full-time personnel. In 1980, the FBI profilers actually released a psychological profile of the Unabomber. They described Ted as a man with above-average intelligence and having ties with academia. The FBI also advertised $1 million reward for anyone that could assist in his capture. It was at this time that Ted actually started to leave false clues on his bombs. The false clues included metal plates that had the initials FC stamped into them. Another bomb that didn't detonate actually had written in it, "Ooh, it works, I told you it would," with the initials RV stamped on it. He also included bits of tree branches and bark in his bombs, most likely to make them more deadly with the shrapnel. June 10th, 1980, United Airlines President Percy Woods opens up a book that explodes. The explosion injures him but doesn't kill him. The book was titled Ice Brothers by Sloan Wilson. October 8th, 1981, a bomb wrapped in brown paper and tied with a string is found in the hallway of University Utah, Salt Lake City. The bomb was safely detonated by a bomb squad. May 5th, 1982, a bomb was sent to the head of the computer science department at the University of Vanderbilt. The bomb detonated and injured the professor's secretary. July 2nd, 1982, a package bomb left in a break room at University of Berkeley explodes and injures a professor. It was at this time that Ted actually started to write his manifesto as well. The manifesto is very similar to his Bible. It basically says that after the Industrial Revolution, all of the technology, machinery, and everything is basically destroying civilization. It also calls for the collapse of the industrial society. May 15th, 1985, another bomb was found at the University of Berkeley. It exploded and injured an engineering student. He lost several fingers and vision in one eye. June 13th, 1985, a suspicious package was sent to the Boeing Fabrication Division in Washington. Someone noticed the package and called the bomb squad. It was safely detonated. November 15th, 1985, a University of Michigan psychology professor and his assistant were injured when they opened up a bomb that looked like a 3-ring binder. Ted included a letter to the professor that asked him to review the thesis he had written. This was a letter to try to throw off the FBI. December 11th, 1985, a nail and splinter-loaded bomb was left in the parking lot of a computer store in Sacramento, California. The bomb explodes and killed the owner of the computer store. February 20th, 1987, another bomb is left outside of a computer store in Sacramento, California. The bomb is actually disguised as a piece of lumber that was left in the parking lot. The owner of the store's son went out to the parking lot, tried to pick up the piece of lumber, and it exploded. As the splinter bomb went off, it caused severe nerve damage to Gary Wright's arm. The bomb also propelled over 200 pieces of shrapnel into Gary's body. Gary Wright actually survived all of his injuries. The store owner actually witnessed Ted placing the bomb on the ground and was able to give detectives a description. This led to the infamous sketch of the Unabomber. June 22nd, 1993, after a 6-year hiatus, Ted Kaczynski started making bombs again. He sent a bomb to a geneticist at the University of California. Charles Epstein actually lost several fingers as he opened the bomb in his kitchen. June 24th, 1993, another bomb detonates, and a computer science professor at Yale University lost a couple fingers on his hand. He also lost sight in one eye and hearing in one ear. December 19th, 1994, an advertising executive, Thomas Moser, lost his life after a package bomb detonated inside his home in New Jersey. Ted then sent a letter to the New York Times saying that he killed Moser because Moser was trying to repair the public image of ExxonMobil after an oil spill. April 24th, 1995, a mail bomb kills the president of California's Forestry Association. In 1995, Ted Kaczynski mailed letters to a few news outlets stating his goals. He also demanded that the news outlets print his 35,000-word manifesto. He said if they printed his manifesto, he would desist from his terroristic acts. The FBI actually said they would publish his manifesto in Penthouse. Ted replied that Penthouse wasn't a respectable news organization, so he said that if they printed it in Penthouse, he would take it upon himself to set off one more bomb and kill one more person. This caused the FBI to actually allow it to be published in the Washington Post. After the manifesto was actually published in the Washington Post, the FBI received thousands of new leads. In the meantime, Ted's brother David actually saw the manifesto published, read it, and it seemed oddly familiar. David actually had suspicion that his brother Ted might be the Unabomber. His suspicion grew even further when the FBI came out and said that the Unabomber might be from the Chicago area and have an above-average IQ. David actually hired a private investigator, Susan Swanson, to look into his brother Ted. Susan Swanson actually began working with an attorney in Washington, D.C. In 1996, about 6 months after the manifesto was published, Susan and the Washington attorney Tony Baselli actually contacted a former FBI profiler. They actually asked the profiler to compare the manifesto to a few letters that Ted sent his brother. The profiler came back and said that based on the letters that Ted wrote to David, he believes with over 60% certainty that Ted was the person that wrote the manifesto as well. He urged David to contact the FBI. In February of 1996, David did contact the FBI. The FBI took their own profiler, did the same experiment, and came to the same conclusion that Ted was the person they were looking for. David and his wife were quickly interviewed by the FBI. David provided the FBI with more letters that Ted wrote to him. The FBI used the postmark dates from those letters to gather a timeline to track the whereabouts of Ted. David worked with the FBI for over 2 months before the FBI felt comfortable getting search warrants for Ted's cabin. Obviously, with David being Ted's brother, it was a bit of a sticky situation. David wanted assurances from the FBI that his name would be kept out of the investigation. The FBI told David that he didn't have anything to worry about and his name would not come up in the investigation at all. However, David's identity was leaked to the press by someone in the FBI. It was sent to the CBS News and word got out that Ted's brother David was helping with the investigation. The FBI did conduct a full investigation as to who leaked that information, but couldn't come up with anything. The FBI arrested Ted Kaczynski in his cabin on April 3rd, 1996. In the cabin, they found a ton of bomb components. They also found over 40,000 handwritten journal pages from Ted. Within those journal pages was also his original 35,000 word manifesto. They also discovered one live bomb. The FBI had finally caught Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, after a 20-year search and a $50 million investigation. Ted Kaczynski was charged with 10 counts of illegally transporting, using, and mailing bombs. He pled guilty to all of the charges in exchange for life in prison without the possibility of parole. Ted was sent to a supermax facility in Florence, South Carolina. While in prison, Ted befriended Ramzi Youssef and Timothy McVeigh. They were the perpetrators of the 1993 World Trade Center bombings and the 1995 Oklahoma City bombings. Ted is still alive today. That is my story of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Leave me a comment. Let me know if you like the long form or the shorter form content. And if you want to see me with a few drinks or what you really like out of the content here. Other than that, that is all I had for you today. Thanks, everybody.